Raised beds are a great way to garden, but don't believe everything you read. They aren't magical. If you're new to gardening and you don't know how to grow vegetables, raised beds aren't going to solve your problem. All raised beds do is make it a little easier to grow vegetables because you don't have to bend down so much. That's about it. Now, in some cases, if your soil is contaminated, and that's a rare case, they also let you garden in places you really shouldn't be gardening because of toxicity problem. Plants need water, nutrients, air, and sunlight. And whether they're growing in the ground or in a raised bed, they still need those things. Your gardening techniques and your knowledge about how to grow the plants doesn't change whether you're in a raised bed or growing in the ground. Well, before we can talk about raised beds, we have to understand what they are. I started gardening 50 years ago, and I used raised beds almost immediately. But back then, a raised bed was an area where you took the soil from the pathway and put it on the bed. And so the bed was 3 or 4 inches higher than the pathway. That's a raised bed. And that's still a valid definition. Today, most people use the term to refer to something that has walls. So you get some sort of material, bricks, wood, and other things, and you actually make walls, and then you fill that space with soil. That's the definition I'm going to use for this program. Now let's have a look at all the myths about raised beds. Myth number 1, it's easy to grow vegetables in a raised bed. If you have a lot of experience growing vegetables, it is easy to grow them in any soil. Raising the level of the soil does not make it any easier, except that it takes a bit less bending. Plants grow equally well at ground level and higher levels, and at ground level, they need to be watered less. If you are not familiar with growing vegetables, raised beds won't really help you. The things you have to learn to become a good gardener have very little to do with the height of the soil. Starting with a bed of really good soil can help a first-time gardener, but it's almost as easy at ground level. Myth number 2, different soil in every bed. It is certainly true that raised beds make it easier to have gardens containing different soil. But is that a good idea? Are there clear guidelines for the best soil for each type of vegetable? As a new gardener, it is difficult enough to learn the basics of growing vegetables. Complicating that with a variety of different soils, each of which requires different cultural techniques, is not a good idea. Learning how to use one type of soil is difficult enough. Learning how to use several is too confusing. Which soil is the best? Try and find authoritative sites that tell you which soil to use for each crop. You won't find any. For one reason, it is too complex, and secondly, most vegetables grow just fine in the same soil mix. If you start with good soil, you can grow 95% of the vegetables. Myth number 3, raised beds have fewer weeds. The claim here is that since the soil level in beds is higher, weeds have a harder time growing up through the bed. People who believe this also put things at the bottom of the bed, such as cardboard or landscape fabric, to stop weed growth. Neither should be used at the bottom of a bed, in part because they don't stop weeds. The reality is that most weeds are the result of germinating seeds, either from the soil used to fill the bed or from seeds that land on the bed as wind blows them around. Weeds coming from below ground are not a common source. The exceptions are a few very nasty weeds, such as Canada thistle, field bindweed, and quackgrass, all of which travel long distances underground. If you have these weeds, higher beds with or without landscape fabric in the bottom won't stop them. Myth number 4, never use in-ground soil. People have been conditioned to believe that their natural in-ground soil is toxic, does not contain any microbial life, and won't grow plants. That is rarely the case. Some soil is toxic. If your house was built on old industrial land, it may have a problem. An older house that used lead-based paint might have higher lead levels in the soil around the house. If you think there might be a problem, have the soil tested. However, the majority of garden soil is not toxic. What about soil life? Builders do remove the topsoil before construction, and that is where a lot of microbes live. They then bring a small amount back to lay sod. So your soil may not have a lot of microbes, but even bad soil has millions of microbes in every speck of soil. As you garden and improve the soil, the microbes will quickly grow in number. Natural soil may have high levels of clay or high levels of sand. Neither of these is perfect for plant growth, but some simple amending with compost quickly corrects these problems. And it is much easier and less expensive than hauling in new soil for a raised bed. The natural soil in 90% of home gardens will allow you to grow great plants. Myth number 5. Beds get overheated in hot climates. Raised beds heat up faster in spring, and the soil may be a bit hotter than the soil in the ground, but the difference is very small. Beds with metal walls will feel hot on the outside since the galvanized metal absorbs a lot of heat, but very little heat gets transmitted into the soil. In one report, most of the soil in a metal bed was 89 degrees Fahrenheit, or 32 degrees Celsius, and only right next to the metal did the soil reach 97 degrees Fahrenheit, or 36 degrees Celsius. Myth number 6. Raised beds use more water. This may or may not be a myth, depending on the material you put in the bed. If the bed is filled mostly with soilless mix or compost, it will dry out much faster than soil at ground level. If the bed is filled with mostly real soil, especially if it contains a lot of clay, the bed won't dry out much faster than at ground level. Mulch is also key here. Use lots of mulch and the bed won't dry out nearly as fast. Myth number 7. You can't add too much compost. This is a complete myth. Too much compost can lead to high levels of phosphorus, which results in soil that is toxic for plants. And once levels are too high, it is difficult to reduce them. Myth number 8. Pressure-treated wood is toxic. Before 2004, the chemicals used to make pressure-treated lumber included a process called CCA, which contained arsenic. Small amounts of arsenic can leach from this wood and be absorbed by plants. For this reason, old CCA pressure-treated lumber is not recommended for raised beds. Almost all of the pressure-treated lumber available today in North America and Europe uses a process called ACQ, which does not contain arsenic or other heavy metals, but it does contain copper. ACQ-treated wood is considered safe for use in the garden. If you are planting simple low beds, I would stick to untreated wood, knowing that it needs to be replaced more frequently. However, if you are building high beds and using a substantial amount of wood, I would use ACQ-treated wood. Myth number 9. Galvanized steel is toxic. Corrugated metal is becoming more popular for raised beds because it lasts longer. It is more expensive, and I think it's ugly. It is a good choice for high beds, but these should only be used if the gardener has a disability and can't use lower beds. Corrugated metal is usually made from galvanized steel, which is coated with a zinc alloy. The zinc can leach out into the soil, but the levels are considered to be very small. Both plants and animals require some zinc in their diet, so there is no health concern. Myth number 10. Raised beds have fewer pests and diseases. I have news for you. Neither pests nor diseases know that you are gardening in raised beds. They are after the plants, and as long as you grow plants, you will have the same pests and diseases as something growing in the ground, with one exception. Raised beds may have fewer slugs, especially if the bed is up on legs. It is even possible that you have more pests. Studies have shown that higher levels of nitrogen produce plants that are more attractive to pests, and many raised gardens are made with high levels of nutrients. One of my readers commented that a raised bed keeps her dog out of the garden. Fair enough, a higher bed will also keep rabbits out, but squirrels and birds will still get in. When people build their first raised bed, they usually get a shock when they try and figure out how much soil they actually take. That's quite a bit. Just calculating the amount is difficult for some people. So what I've done is I've created a soil calculator to help you with that problem. Use it to figure out how much soil you need for any kind of raised bed. It's also very useful for figuring out how much gravel you need for pathways, or how much mulch you need to cover the whole garden. You can get to that right here. And if you're interested in raised bed design, have a look at my video here. Happy gardening.